Okay, let's unpack this. We're jumping straight into a document that really marks the beginning of official interest in something pretty extraordinary.
Right. We've got this collection memorandum.
Dated October 28th, 1947. I mean, think about that time frame.
Yeah, just after World War II. The world's changing fast.
And here you have a formal memo focused on intelligence requirements on flying saucer-type aircraft.
It wasn't just some random note. This was official.
From the Plans and Collection Branch, no less. Addressed to multiple places, and it even mentions a chat between two Lieutenant Colonels Smith and Garrett.
Right away, that tells you it's being discussed at a significant level within the military.
It gives you that sense of a serious inquiry right from the start.
And what really jumps out is that term flying saucer type aircraft, already being used in official documents in 47.
Yeah.
It shows these reports weren't just like whispers. They'd gained enough traction to actually get their own label for intelligence gathering.
So this memo, it's kind of the point where stories become potential intel.
Exactly, a potential intelligence concern.
And it wasn't just a one-off thing either. The memo says, make 10 extra copies.
For the Directorate of Intelligence, right?
Specifically, yeah, Air Intelligence Requirements Division, Collection Branch, for their files.
So formal documentation, sharing it across key units. They weren't just filing the initial request away.
They clearly felt a need to, really understand what was being reported.
Well, if you think about the context, any formal documentation like this in intelligence, it suggests they're thinking about national security implications.
Even if they had no idea what these flying saucers were.
Especially then, maybe. The unknown can be a threat. The fact they're discussing it at this level, creating memos, it shows a need to gather info, analyze it systematically.
Okay, so this initial questioning, this need to know more about these, strange things in the sky.
Yeah.
That leads us to Project Sign, which is what we're diving into today. And inside that project, there was this really crucial effort called the Estimate of the Situation.
EOTs.
EOTs. So our goal today is really to get to the bottom of how this early interest started, with the first steps taken to figure it all out.
And if you're looking for that essential story without getting too bogged down in side details, this is the place to be.
Definitely. We're cutting through the noise.
But it makes you wonder, doesn't it? What makes something so out there, like a flying saucer report, suddenly become serious military intelligence business?
It must mean the early accounts had something credible about them.
Or potential implications they just couldn't ignore.
Okay, so let's rewind a bit. Middle of 1947. What really kicked this whole thing off?
Well, a really big one was the Kenneth Arnold sighting.
Right. June 24th, 1947, near Mount Rainier, Washington.
He was a civilian pilot, and he saw something. Well, pretty amazing.
9 objects. He said they were mirror-like.
Shiny. And circular, kind of like saucers skimming on water, which is where the name came from.
And big. He figured about the size of a DC-4 plane.
That's like 45, maybe 50 feet across. Pretty substantial.
And the details he gave were specific.
Very. Flying in a horizontal line, north to south, about 170 degrees.
And the speed?
Estimated around 1,200 miles per hour, which, in 1947, that was just way beyond anything known.
Way beyond. He watched them for a couple of minutes, maybe 3, at about 9,500 feet.
And crucially, no sound, no exhaust trails.
Nothing like a conventional plane.
Those details immediately set these objects apart.
And then, almost immediately after,
the very next day, June 25th.
Another sighting. This time a military pilot, First Lieutenant Eric B. Armstrong.
Over near Lake Mead, Nevada, about 30 miles northwest.
He saw 5 or 6 objects. White, circular.
Smaller, he thought. Maybe 30 feet across.
Flying really close together. Horizontal formation again.
Slower, though. Estimated 285 miles per hour, around 6,000 feet altitude. Moving southeast about 120 degrees, smoothly.
And Armstrong's report, well, it carried weight, didn't it?
Absolutely. Experienced pilot, trained observer. He'd know an airplane if he saw one.
And the record notes he was sure these weren't normal aircraft.
Right. And it also mentions his description was, measured. No hype.
Just reporting what he saw.
Yeah.
Which adds credibility.
Exactly. He wasn't trying to sell a crazy story.
And these two, Arnold and Armstrong, they weren't alone, were they?
Not even close. That secret draft collection memo we mentioned earlier, It talks about widespread reports, lots of people seeing an alleged flying saucer-type aircraft or object in flight approximating the shape of a disc.
And from all over the place.
Yeah, the U.S., Alaska, Canada, even Hungary, Oman, Japan.
Wow. and not just random folks on the ground.
No, the memo specifically mentions USAF-rated officers among the observers, pilots, other trained personnel.
That really shows how widespread it was and the kind of people seeing these things.
The number and the geographical spread, that's key. It wasn't just one local phenomenon.
And having military observers involved must have really raised some eyebrows.
You'd think so. It would definitely add urgency in intelligence circles.
Okay, so you've got all these reports flooding in, credible witnesses, trained observers.
The military has to react, right?
Right. And that leads us to Project Sign.
The first big official investigation.
Top secret. Started by the U.S. Air Force in 1947, specifically to look into these UFO reports.
And you have to remember the climate. Post-WWRI.
Yeah, a very watchful time, heightened awareness of potential threats.
Now, our source material doesn't explicitly say Project Sign was because of, say, Cold War fears yet, but...
But it makes sense. In that environment, unidentified flying objects, especially ones doing weird things.
You'd investigate them from a national security angle. It's just logical.
So within Project Sign, they needed to actually analyze all this data.
Make sense of it.
And that's where the estimate of the situation comes in, the EOTS.
Right.
So what is an EOTS, really, in simple terms?
Think of it like this. You gather all the information you have, the sightings, the descriptions, locations, times, everything.
All those pieces of the puzzle.
Exactly. And the EOTS is the process, the project, to put those pieces together and figure out what they actually mean. What's the most likely picture?
And estimate of the situation is a standard term.
Oh, yeah. Very common in military and intelligence work. It's a structured way to analyze things.
How so?
You gather the facts, you assess how reliable they are, like, is this witness credible? You look at different possibilities, different explanations.
Even the unlikely ones.
You have to consider everything. And then you try to determine the most probable explanation based on the evidence you have.
Okay, so it's a methodical approach.
Thorough. Designed to understand a complex situation.
And that first memo we talked about, the collection memorandum, it kind of hints this was serious business.
Absolutely. You've got intelligence personnel involved, formal documentation, distribution lists.
You were clearly taking it very seriously. This wasn't being treated lightly.
No, it suggests top-notch A1 work, as you said. You collect everything, Arnold, Armstrong, all the others, you analyze it critically.
Look for patterns, inconsistencies.
Right. Could it be weather?
Right.
Known aircraft? Secret projects? You explore all angles?
Even if the answer seems strange.
The goal is the most reasonable conclusion from the evidence, even if it challenges what you currently believe or understand. That's the core of a good estimate.
And despite all this effort, Project Sign, the EOTS, the basic question remained, didn't it?
Or these things. Yeah, that mystery largely remained.
And that early puzzle, it's really fueled decades of interest, both public and official. It hasn't gone away.
Not at all. It's fascinating how that initial 1947 period just set the stage.
And we're seeing echoes of it even now.
Definitely. You look at the recent release of U.S. Navy videos, the UAP footage.
And Congress holding hearings talking about legacy UFO cases.
It brings it right back around.
Yeah.
The questions raised back then are still relevant, still largely unanswered.
And people outside official channels are digging too. You mentioned David Marler.
Yeah, folks like him doing amazing work preserving and digitizing old UFO documents.
It shows just how much information has been collected over the years.
Huge amounts. And things like the National UFO Historical Records Center and UFO HRC.
Try and make those records accessible.
It points to this deep, ongoing desire to understand the history, to find answers.
Because there's this enduring mystery.
Absolutely. These efforts to archive and analyze, they let us look back with maybe fresh eyes, see things that were missed.
And it really does all circle back to 1947, that collection memorandum we started with. That's the formal beginning.
It underscores that right from the get-go. Credible people, trained observers.
We're seeing things they couldn't explain.
And the military took it seriously enough to launch major investigations.
Okay, so let's pull it together then. We saw how those mid-1947 sightings, like Arnold's and Armstrong's, were the catalysts.
Freak rigor, yeah. Leading directly to Project Sign.
And the start of serious intelligence work, like the estimate of the situation.
These weren't just casual inquiries. They were formal, high-level attempts within the military to understand this. Well, this flying saucer mystery, documented efforts.
Right. Even in those very early days, they weren't just dismissing it. Formal procedures, intelligence gathering, analysis.
Applying the tools they had to figure out what people were seeing up there.
It shows it wasn't just rumor. It prompted a significant official response.
Which leaves you with a final thought, maybe.
Go on.
Just consider how those questions from 1947 sparked by those sightings and investigations are still echoing today. What does it really mean that highly trained people saw things that defied easy answers back then, and that the mystery, in many ways, persists?
It certainly gives you something to think about, the implications of such a long-standing enigma.
Definitely something to ponder. And, this deep dive is really just scratching the surface of a much bigger story.
Illuminati got me feeling like Tupacalypse. I would have been on top of the charts, but it's politics. You do some gimmick shit and post, you get a lot of clicks. Drop some real shit and they probably won't acknowledge it.